I think the reality of the level of integration we're going to have with AI, we need to switch our thinking to being crew, not passengers. And I really like this analogy that we've got to ask the questions. We've got to make our providers accountable. So we don't just sit back and let it kind of wash over us. We're not a passenger in this.
Hello and welcome back to Culture in Action. I'm Luke Fisher, CEO of Mo. My guest today is Justine Whitaker, an experienced people leader, culture strategist, and someone who's been diving deep into how AI is transforming the talent space after a couple of months off. In this episode, we explore what happens when humans and technology truly collaborate, not just coexist. Justine shares how she's been studying AI through the lens of human-centered design and why being crew, not passengers on this journey, matters for the future of work, and how some small daily habits like 15 minutes of learning can future-proof your career. If you've wondered how AI can make work more human, this conversation's definitely for you. So let's get us started with a relatively broad question. I'd like to say that I think you've had the last few months off since your last role, but it doesn't seem like that's quite true. But I'd love to hear what you've been pulled into and how you've been exploring AI in this talent space since you've had a little bit more time on your hands.
Yeah. Well, look, I took the opportunity given that whilst there's a lot that we don't know, the one thing we do know for sure is that AI is going to be omnipresent in whatever happens in the future. Whether you think it's overhyped or underhyped, there's no two ways about it that AI is going to be with us, whether you see it as kind of augmented or whether you see it as through the lens of automation. So I took the opportunity to try and get myself as equipped as possible. So that includes just some of my own practice, reading and following people online who are the trailblazers, and also most recently doing some study more formally through Wharton. So I was interested in them because they're looking at AI, innovation, and human-centered design. So a mixture of my own kind of curiosity and some formal learning.
Very cool. And then was there a particular moment for you as you started getting into it? I imagine the first day or two where you're like, I'm intrigued, let's have a look at AI. And then you get into it and then you're like, okay, we need to fundamentally rethink in HR how we think about AI. Was there one of those moments or not?
Yeah, so I think one of them was a sort of anthropomorphic moment where I was playing around on Chat GPT and then it made a suggestion as to what it should do next, which almost made it feel like the AI was clairvoyant. It had anticipated what I was going to need to do next really, really accurately. So that certainly was, a moment. And then I think the other one is when I've been working just with a classic good old LLM and have asked it some questions to help me become more aware of my blind spots. So I would ask it, what do you see that I have missed? Or what have you learned about me in this session that I may not have picked up on? I think all of those moments really helped me shape my relationship and some of my kind of philosophical points of view on what kind of relationship I want to have with inorganic intelligence and how it will complement my organic intelligence in the future.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And then of the applications that you've either seen or tested yourself, is there one in which you've gone, wow, okay, this can make a really meaningful difference to my life as an individual or as a CPO, as you spend a lot of your time?
Yeah, so I think the things that have had the most impact on me are those applications of AI which break the silos down. So you're classically, particularly in the people world, we stay in our lane, and I think that's a mistake, and I think that hurts us. The tools and the applications that don't stay in their lane and they deliberately, a very good example is I've come across an excellent application which brings data and information from your CX your customer facing world and insights from your PX world, brings them together in real time. It doesn't just give you an insight, it actually creates a measure of ROI based on the actions you've taken. So it gives you a business impact. So that's
Okay.
the stuff that impresses me. We are actually able to aggregate information or insight or sentiment from silos that have previously been mutually exclusive. I think that's where it gets really exciting. We can traverse those lanes and bring a more multidisciplinary approach to solving some increasingly complicated problems.
Very interesting. And with that, I guess begs the question of like, are we overlooking any areas of the employee experience where
Mm,
AI could be delivering pretty substantial value at the moment?
mm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot that it can do. I definitely think we get very consumed with what our relationship with AI should look like. Whether it will replace us, whether it will augment us. I think the piece of thinking that we do need to think really hard about is what is the management of the risk? What is the management of the reputation? How do we get over some of these blockers around trust such that it is actually going to be possible to collaborate and integrate with whatever form your AI takes so we can keep the human in the loop piece and actually optimize our potential as well as optimizing the potential inherent in this phenomenal technology. So I guess my answer, Luke, is less what is not being done in terms of application of AI, but rather in the way we're talking and thinking about it. I think there are some big questions that we can solve, but they are more related to the slightly more sort of philosophical and ethical and risk management around the utilization of the tech. And you might go, well, why don't you leave that to the big tech companies and the Eric Smiths of this world? But I think the reality of the level of integration we're going to have with AI, we need to switch our thinking to being crew, not passengers. And I really like this analogy that we've got to ask the questions. We've got to make our providers accountable. So we don't just sit back and let it kind of wash over us. We're not a passenger in this. There is an opportunity for you to be crew and influence it by actually asking some really good searching questions to drive accountability, transparency, robust ethical and governance frameworks, etc. So that's where my eye is going rather than gaps in application of AI.
Okay. That's why I've loved spending so much time with you, to be honest, is you can see that maybe not even crew, but you're trying to pilot the ship in many cases and really understand the direction of travel.
Yeah.
It's very, very cool.
What do you have a kind of view you must on that sort of ethical, existential, reputational kind of risk and what our relationship as users of AI, what that relationship should look like?
So I think the biggest fear that I have is that people are going to fall to autopilot because it gives you the opportunity to become lazy because it's smart and it learns you and it understands the decisions that you would make. And therefore you get into a point where you lack original thought because you might have new context or new nuance of information in which you've been able to interpret that the AI hasn't. That in your gut would cause you to make a different decision, but you actually have become so reliant that you just follow what's returned to you. And I think that's the bit in which causes me the most amount of worry. And I've seen that just in some of my own behaviors in like, when I feel like I've got cognitive overload, you make a lot of decisions in my job and I'm sure you do yours. And you get to the point in which you're like, oh, okay, I can formulate roughly this, but how about I just have AI write me the core structure so I can do 80% of the work and I don't have to think about it. And then I can refine and that's a much easier job. The small things like that as we become more and more heavily dependent, I think a lot of the risk sits there in dependency because products that are great fall into our lives and become a critical part of it. And it goes from conscious to subconscious. And I think at that point, that's the interesting zone in which interventions from the AI that pique your kind of consciousness of your decisions could be quite an interesting one, just to keep people on their toes. So yeah, that'll be the one for me. What do you think?
Yeah. The other thing I think that is super interesting is the relationship we build with
Yeah,
it. So
yeah,
I mentioned sort of anthropomorphizing it. You're actually seeing a machine as having an identity and a personality. And I
yeah,
caught myself saying please and thank you. And
yeah,
I really appreciate that. Which I think is really interesting. On one hand, you go, well, look, I'm kind of treating it like an inorganic colleague.
yeah,
On the other hand, you go, you mad, it's a machine. It's like
yeah,
empathy tech, because the reality of it is to actually process my please and thank yous and could you, all of that is going to need to go to the cloud and through a big data center, and there's actual cost to the
yeah,
climate and all sorts of things when I add that level of politeness in, which is
yeah.
not actually
Required.
necessary, but I
Yeah,
do it because I look at the AI almost as if it's a
team member.
person. It
Yeah,
triggers my reciprocity. I think if I'm pleasant to it, it might be pleasant and work well or more accurately for me. So I think increasingly this whole literal relationship we have with it in whatever forms it takes going to be a super interesting area to watch and explore.
yeah. It's funny, this reminds me of a conversation that I had with one of my team, which is I'm polite to it because when the machines take over, they'll remember me,
Yeah.
which leads me to my next question, which is about trust and the adoption of technology and
Mm,
how often trusting something is a big blocker to the outcome,
mm,
which is mass efficiency. And I heard whilst away last week at the UKG event, they talked about reversing the productivity equation, which normally most firms will look for the same level of investment, increased output. But AI is probably the first time in which we can reduce effort and increase output.
mm, mm,
So the outcome potential is really significant,
mm.
but the human adoption of it is still required for now. So how are you seeing trust in AI tools be built successfully by organizations that are adopting?
Mm. So I think the interesting lens on this is looking at it through the lens of human biases and heuristics. So regardless of whether it's digital technology or AI technology or automation technology, we always have a risk aversion and we favor the status quo. So the reality of it is, before we even start, regardless of what the nature of the change is, we favor the devil we know rather than the devil we don't. And we know from a
Yeah,
psychological perspective, even if something is going to be advantageous to us, if it requires change, we are likely to just kind of want to lean back from it.
yeah,
So I think that is very relevant and very ever present, regardless of the nature of the change. I think there's also a really interesting point when we think about what's called algorithmic aversion, which means that in just layman's terms, we are more willing to let a human off for a mistake than we are a machine. So if we're working together, Luke, you make a mistake in an important spreadsheet, I'm probably going to go, Luke's a bit
always only
tired,
human.
but I'm sure he tried really hard. My
Yeah,
AI makes a mistake, has a hallucination. I get quite ratty with it. And it doesn't take me much to lose my trust. And
hmm,
some of that is because a lot of the intelligence is in a black box that I don't understand, which I
yeah,
can't control. So I think those biases are ever present and make it difficult for us to ingest any new technology. I don't think they're new to AI. If you said, what would I do to build trust? The things that I think I'd be thinking about. One is the first impression.
yeah,
Again, we know that that's very indelible. So we think about an anchoring bias. Was your first experience a good one? or not. And simply, it's really, really hard to re-engineer that first
A bad
impression.
experience.
So I think
Yeah.
that's super important. I don't think we think about that enough. I think the other thing to think about is, exactly what is the problem we're trying to solve. Work backwards. So you're looking for those pressure points, or you're looking for, areas that are really difficult, where you want to try and solve for those, so you can show what can be done rather than just fiddly diddlying around. I
Yeah.
think that would be a couple of things I would be thinking about. How do you manage that first impression, that first experience with the interface? And then secondly, how are you solving the problem that really matters, that grabs people's attention, reduces friction, and focus on dedicating the technology to try to solve something real.
Yeah, it's interesting. Your answer gives me two considerations. One of them is about how you build trust. The other one is about how often I hear people say AI is a wonderful solution seeking a problem or a clear use
Oh,
case.
I love that too.
And I think it is often that people don't think thoughtfully enough to express what the problem is that they're trying to solve,
Mhm,
or know the problem that generates the most amount of value for them,
mhm,
because everybody's situation is unique, but AI has such broad capability that it can be relevant to all,
mhm,
that you end up in a position in which you don't get the aha. We talk about it as an aha moment,
mhm,
which is you go from value promised to value delivered. And at the point in which that happens, that's your aha moment.
mhm,
So all of these tools are trying to take you to a point in which you go, I came to do this job
mhm,
and I got it. And AI has the opportunity to do it exceptionally quickly
mhm,
compared to things like you've implemented HR systems, right? And that can take an age.
mhm,
And it takes you 9 months to implement and 9 months to get value. So you're waiting 18 months
mhm,
in order to get it. AI has a wonderful opportunity to instantly create value for you,
mhm,
which ties into the trust point, I think, which is one of, I always think about trust quite simply like predictability based
mhm,
trust or vulnerability based trust in the two primary ways in which we build it. We show up the same, which becomes predictable,
mhm,
or we're vulnerable, which is exposing of ourselves in order to show I'm open to you and therefore don't feel exposed. And you start to develop relationships off the back of that.
mhm,
I think we're particularly harsh on AI when it comes to predictability based trust,
mhm,
because I think our bias is that it's going to catch us out somewhere.
mhm,
Because probably sci-fi movies forever that have said machines are going to take over and so on. It's
mhm,
just in there somewhere.
mhm.
I wonder from a design standpoint, and I wonder if anyone listening can message me on LinkedIn to tell me this, but like how much the vulnerability consideration's been baked into the AI interface. Because when you talked about the work you're doing at Wharton for human-centered design, is I've never heard AI say that it got it wrong.
Mhm.
Or I've never seen AI be in a position where they're like, that's probably not one of my strongest areas, but here's how I would start to build some rationale around it. Because you would hear humans do that all of the
Yeah.
time
I,
and it
I,
pulls you in.
I think, Luke, that comes back to some of my remark around crew, not passengers, because
Yeah.
when I'm working with my LLMs, for example, I will say, give me a confidence rating on how certain you are that this is correct,
Yeah.
particularly where it's something that
Yeah.
it needs to be important. Your
Yeah.
link to your source, validate.
Yeah.
There's a point at which you can be a passenger and go, look, I really hope that it's going to get this right for me. And then there's a time where you can be crew and interrogate it, trust it, but validate or verify it.
Yeah.
You can switch between LLMs and you have one running off against another. I often do that, put one data set into one LLM and another into another, see what you get. So to your earlier point, still utilize your critical thinking and say, does this feel right? And then if it doesn't feel right or you don't know what to do, you can always ask the AI, what do I do next? What would a leading strategist in this area do? What would a risk adverse person? What would Simon
Yeah.
Sinek? What would Barack Obama? Whatever your persona of choice.
Yeah.
But I do completely agree with you. I think the trust is a really interesting one. And we also have a choice to whether we play become kind of crew or whether we are passengers and go, it's black box, I'm out of my head.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting.
Mm.
Let's talk just a little bit about hype versus reality. I think I don't go through a podcast without it coming up. I don't go to an event without somebody mentioning it. And I don't think we've seen an RFP for a little while now that doesn't mention what are you doing in terms of AI. I'd love to get your thoughts when you look at the role of the chief people officer and you say, here's all of my jobs to do. Where's the hype sitting and where deserves more opportunity when you think about the breadth of a modern CPO?
Yeah. So this might not surprise you, Luke, that I would go in a oblique direction with the question. I would first be looking at the role of a CPO. And I think in an ideal futuristic world, I would be looking to see if we could create something that is a hybridized of your CPO and your CTO or your CIO. So your chief technology officer, your chief innovation officer. I really think that nobody does themselves any service by staying in their lane and their silo.
Yeah.
And the future really does belong to those who have enough humility and, let's be frank, common sense to actually go, if we're thinking about strategic workforce planning, that is not the realm of just the CPO anymore. That is very much the realm of the CTO and the CPO and maybe the COO as well, maybe the chief risk officer, even. So I think one of the areas that is somewhat under-examined is how we actually think about the structure of the people function and those vertically integrated elements of it, particularly technology, and kind of get over this, well, who owns it? Right? The reality is like culture. We all own it. We all have a stake in AI. And I think you capture that in the way you structure your organizational functions cleverly.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for the workforce you've got now, but for the workforce and the way of working you want to have in the future.
Yeah, okay, interesting. And if I just bring it a little bit closer to home, if you're now speaking to a CPO, taking all of what you've learned and your career, a great career that you've had, and you say AI in your role, in your world, sounds like from what you've said is more like a collaborator than a tool. How did you get to that point?
Yes. If I think about my relationship and what that would mean in terms of the way I would structure my function and my own role, I think there's pieces of AI that it's great because I'm automated. The mind-numbing meeting transcripts and all that. AI can do that. Good luck to it. It does it better than I ever would. Let it automate, automate that, which is absolutely brilliant. And then the other side, I think about how it would augment rather than replace me. What does it do well? What do I do well? And then how do we work with the human in the loop kind of ethos to get the best benefit for everybody out of the tech and the best benefit out of the human in the loop and the capabilities, that we bring that the tech doesn't have yet and probably will never have to the level that people do. So I feel really optimistic about the future. And I think the reality of it is, if it's underhyped, then we are well prepared.
Yeah.
But it is entirely possible that this whole thing will go faster than anyone can possibly predict. So, I don't think it does any harm to be actively thinking about this, exploring this. And a very good friend of mine, Zoe Walters, talks about spending at least 15 minutes religiously every day exploring, thinking, playing, experimenting.
Yeah. I wonder, this might be a tough question to answer, but let's go with like a 2-year window. What do you reckon the day-to-day, week-to-week of a chief people officer looks like?
So I would love to see chief people officers working in a much more multidisciplinary way. So I would like to see, chief people officers spending more time with finance and tech and risk and customer. and for us to be working on shared, integrated, real-time data sets. I think if AI and the tech can deliver us integrated real-time data sets, that also allows us more time to be pivoting and actually spending more time in the sentiment analysis and the face-to-face time. So, yeah, I think that good CPOs have really good data disciplines. They'll also have a great ability to link quantitative and qualitative data and extrapolate the trends from that. So look back historically, but also use them predictively so we can anticipate what's going to happen next. I also think it's a great opportunity to give our people more and more autonomy, and the tech will help us do that, and more mastery, which I think the tech will also give us a great opportunity to do. So I'd love to see the CPO role change quite materially so we can leverage the automation and give us more time with augmenting our intelligence to actually do some of the more predictive work that is ultimately good, for our customers, for our stakeholders, for our shareholders, and of course for all of our people.
Before I come to the employee, because you raise a really good point about empowering them and providing them with autonomy, I want to roll an exercise with you, which is relating to your AI companion in this 2-year picture. And I would love you to give me some, what if AI did for the CPO? And what would that mean that you think you'll be spending time on?
What if AI did? I mean, it would be, at the moment that AI doesn't, other than my text, pick up my sentiment. It doesn't pick up my galvanic skin response or heart beating fast or any of those kinds of things. And it would be great to integrate the kind of wearables with the tech so that I was able to give another data set to the technology to help me. Now, I know that's a big leap, but I think that could be really, really valuable on lots of fronts. Where I find the tech helps me, it's really challenged my thinking. What have I missed? Is there a different perspective? How do we make this more strategic? What do I need to do to learn more? So the tech can strengthen that. I think that would be absolutely wonderful. And to get my hands on as much integrated, high quality data and information as possible would be fantastic. And I would use that to scenario plan and run multiple possible futures and then to plan and strategize. So I think it would help me reverse engineer and prepare more robustly for a future that nobody can anticipate. So if it could help me do that, absolutely, that would be a thrill. I think there'll be a real game changer for what we do in our field at the moment.
Yeah, fascinating. So I was in Las Vegas last week for UKG Aspire. For anyone listening much later, because this probably will be on a little bit of a delay, I apologize. They had 2 things that are directly related to what you've just said. One is the integration of wearables so that you can start to understand heart rate and how that intersects against your workforce management data. So if somebody's starting to see a stress spike, for example, you might want to recommend breaks. They're tracking that via wearables, integrating it with the workforce planning data, and then making recommendations to support you, basically. Hey, this person's showing signs of stress. Why don't you look to encourage an earlier break? Here's how you can rework your day, etc.
Brilliant.
And then the second one was all around predictive analytics and recommended actions. So based upon multiple kind of if this, then that type scenarios, the ability to bridge shared context across the different business areas, recommended certain actions to be completed by the manager. So that manager empowerment piece was a massive step in the right direction. But it's really funny that you've basically listed the same 2 of the 4 things that they talked about in terms of their what if exercise last week.
Yeah, so
cool.
It's so great, Luke. I'm delighted to hear there's a level of alignment. And if we can get to a point where we have enough humility and enough openness to learn and unlearn, and begin to think about things differently, I think it can be really good, for all of us in terms of some of those insights. But, no one said it's going to be easy, but nothing
Yeah.
ever is or was. And it's not going to get any slower. It's only going to get faster. That's another kind of unmutable truth. It's just going to get faster. So,
Yeah.
anything we can do to help ourselves adapt, to learn, to have a better quality of life, to be thinking about the things that matter, to be spending time with the people that matter to us, doing the work that really matters, meaningful and purposeful, is a good thing.
Yeah, agreed. Last couple of questions before we jump into our lightning round. We touched a little bit on AI is dominating most of the boardrooms, so a lot of the senior people are trying to understand it. But have you got any great use cases of what you've seen from the average employee or manager and how they've been well empowered using AI, or is the adoption not there yet?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've seen very recently, which I thought was fabulous, is if you've ever created skills, infrastructure or skills framework, or even if you've tried to customize a universal one like a Sophia framework, it's the skills for the information age. It can take a year to customize that. And by the time you've done that, you need a lie down. And all you've got is a fancy list. Then you've actually got to go through and map what you've got. And then there's always the issues around, validation of skills, breadth and depth and veracity. Come across a tool end of last week that can do all of that pretty much instantaneously. So you can upload your role profiles, it can map them to a universal framework, which you can then customize, can push back out to you revised role profiles, revised clusters of skills to make new jobs, and then run a variety of risk analysis on it. Now, they can do that in probably that full analysis in maybe a little bit short of 5 minutes. And it took me in my job with a great team using internationally established framework, a little bit over 12 months. So I think there's some remarkable things are
Very,
coming.
very cool. And if most of this that we've talked to is transformation over the next couple of years, I'm a big, big fan of like marginal changes and how you can start to get some traction pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If someone's sat here listening or watching and saying, okay, I'm in, but I need to start small, what initiatives would you start on if they wanted to start from Monday to start shifting either their prospects or their culture with AI?
Yeah. So I would definitely carve out a minimum of 15 minutes and make it not negotiable. I absolutely am just completely convinced you cannot not do it. This is the best thing you can do to future-proof yourself. So 15 minutes, not negotiable. And then there's a number of different directions you can go. There's always good thought leaders on LinkedIn that you can follow. You could ask ChatGPT or Claude or whoever you're working with, how do I learn about this? So I've taught my ChatGPT to give me an AI prompt every day to help improve my prompt engineering. So I think you can ask the AI to help you create a learning program. If you're a more formal learner, there are really great programs that are free, available from OpenAI, for example, Google. So look at what's free and available. The other thing which I found really useful is find people who are already doing it and ask them what they use, what they're playing with, and that kind of vicarious learning. So I think you could learn from others. And also I think the biggest piece of advice I could give is regardless of what you do something.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
perfect answer. I think the only definitive advice is don't do nothing. Do something related to AI every day without fault.
Perfect. Closing questions then. So we've got one from a past guest, Tom. He said, how are you staying human in an increasingly high-tech world?
Yeah, so I love this question. And I just don't see it as an or. I see it as an and. So, how am I staying human? I guess I think people are great. I love everyone's quirks and eccentricities and diversity. So I'm very much embracing that. I'm continuing to work on my emotional intelligence, the ability I have to relate to other people and continue to get better and better at that, because that is an innately human strength that I think any AI or even any super intelligence is going to really struggle to emulate. So I really am working on my intelligence really actively for those reasons.
Yeah. Smirk, because relational intelligence is something I looked into quite a lot, quite a few years ago.
Mhm.
And I'm like, it's going to be more relevant than ever when most of the recommendations are smarter than most of us.
Yeah, totally.
Right, quick fire questions then. One tech tool that you can't live without as a leader. If you don't say something related to AI, I'm going to cry.
No, do you know what? I wish I had shares in this. I am going to mention the name because it's brilliant. It's called Whisper AI. It's voice to text. It's fabulous because it takes your voice, turns it into text in any application. LinkedIn comments, Excel, spreadsheet, PowerPoint, slides, Facebook, everything. And then it learns your vernacular really fast and really accurately. So my typing speed is about 40 words a minute, and I'm terribly inaccurate, but my voice to text is 86. So I can speak a lot more quickly. And even with my Kiwi accent, it will learn. So I can speak a lot more quickly than I can type. So I pretty much don't need to touch my keyboard, and everything I produce sounds like me, not like Copilot, because it is me. So it
Yeah.
allows me to be both authentic and productive, and don't need to touch my keyboard.
Wonderful. It's very cool. The moment that you look at with the most amount of joy from your entire career.
Oh, there's been lots. One of my absolute favorites is I worked for an Indigenous Maori tribe in New Zealand called Tarananga o Ngāi Tahu. And one of my proudest moments was the CEO agreeing to appoint two of us at the same time, myself and my successor at the same time at the commencement of my appointment, on the understanding that the moment she could ascend into the executive role, she was from the tribe, I wasn't. So the moment she was ready to lead the people function for her people, I would move aside. And I think it was very inspired that he agreed to that. And I'm incredibly proud of that decision and even more proud of that outcome.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. That's a great story.
I think
A thinker, an author, or a book that has influenced your approach to organizational culture.
you might predict, I'm going to say Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. So for those who aren't familiar with Viktor Frankl, he talks about us always having the freedom to choose how we respond between stimulus and response. So I think all too often we think, I've given no choice. Like I have no choice. There is no other way. And he reminds us all through some of the most trying sets of circumstance that between stimulus and response is what he calls the last of the human freedoms, which is our free will and our freedom to choose. So I highly recommend it. It's a difficult book to read, but it is one of the most widely published books next to the Bible. It is a challenging read, but it's a profound read, and that has shaped me in terms of how I think about culture in organizations, but most importantly, how I think about our relationships to each other and to our environments.
Very good. Two last questions. A culture trend that you're most excited about.
Yeah. So there's a really good Harvard Business Review paper produced this week by Amy Brann, Brann, and she makes a brilliant argument linking neuroscience and well-being. We talk a lot about productivity, And her article is excellent because it talks about how we can harness the latest insights from neuroscience to optimize our brain performance and to optimize our well-being. So I really like that thinking. It's very edgy. Also very practical because we're harnessing capability we've already got, just using our brains function in a really different way. So Amy's paper is an excellent read.
Very cool. And then one question that you would love the next guest on the podcast to answer about driving culture change?
I would like them to share with us all one thing that they have done as a leader, which is most profoundly and sustainably shifted an organization's culture.
Very cool. Justine, thank you ever so much. This has been wonderful. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Great fun, Luke. Thank you for inviting me. I've really enjoyed the questions and the dialogue. So thank you.
Thanks for listening to Culture in Action. As we wrap up the series, Mo has recently been acquired by UKG. I'm excited to share that they are launching a new podcast. When Work Works launches this January, bringing fresh stories and insights about what makes great workplaces thrive. To learn more, visit ukg.com/podcast.